Joining me now, Congressman Steve Stivers. He's the Republican of Ohio, but he's also chairman of the National Republican Congressional Campaign Committee. Translation, he's the point man in charge of keeping Paul Ryan Speaker of the House. Congressman Stivers, welcome back to the show, sir.
Great to be back, Chuck.
All right, let me start with a basic question. Why, I've noticed a lot of people are looking at Alabama and saying, you know what, that was a Roy Moore problem, not a Donald Trump problem. But do you look at a 48% job approval rating in deep red Alabama and say to yourself, oof, this could be a Donald Trump problem for Republicans across the country?
Well, Chuck, this was mostly a Roy Moore problem because campaigns are about candidates. They're about the campaign you run and the fundraising that you have. And Roy Moore was a bad candidate. He was accused of very serious misdeeds, sexual misconduct. He ran a bad campaign. He wasn't talking about the things the people of Alabama wanted to talk about. And frankly, he got outraised. You can't lose all of those things. You might be able to be down on one and up on the other two if you want to win. This was mostly a Roy Moore problem. You know, the question was, could the president save him? And the president's numbers at 48-48, he couldn't save him. But I don't think the president cost him the election, but the president couldn't all by himself save Roy Moore from having a bad campaign, being a bad candidate, and having bad fundraising.
All right. Look, everybody's looking for some sort of a nugget to figure out what in 2017 have we learned that will tell us something about 2018. I understand it's only a handful of races, but there is a pattern here, whether it was Kansas 4, the Montana special, Georgia, South Carolina. Then you had the general election of Virginia and New Jersey, and then you had Alabama. Now, the good news for you is your committee still won all those races I pointed out. But if you look,
we're 5-0,
right.
Chuck.
However, in every one of those places, Democrats overperformed, Republicans underperformed. And by November and December, those underperformances turned into Democratic victories. Is this a canary in the coal mine that you're concerned about?
Well, we are making preparations, and we're trying to make sure we're ready, but I don't think that we can overestimate both Virginia and Alabama. Virginia was a blue state. It got a little bluer, and Alabama was a Roy Moore problem. You know, campaigns are about three things, like I said. They're about the candidate, they're about the campaign you run, and they're about money. And in those special elections, I told my team I don't want to buy blowouts. So as long as we're outside the margin of error, like we were in Utah, like we were, and by the way, in Utah, we exceeded the margin of the district. And that was just a few weeks ago. That was the one that went unnoticed of our five. But in both both South Dakota,
South Carolina
and Utah, we didn't have to do much. But in the races where we did get involved, we got involved in Kansas, Montana, and Georgia. We didn't buy blowouts, but we bought victories. And that's what we need to do. And we have them on defense in Minnesota. We have them on defense in Nevada. We have them on defense in Arizona. I feel pretty confident. You know, right now there's 5 Democrat retirements of competitive districts, 5 Republican retirements in competitive districts. The difference is in our retirements, we've got great candidates like Dino Rossi, who raised $1 million in 20 days. And frankly, they've got lackluster candidates, and we're going to pick up Tim Wall's seat. I think we're going to pick up a few of the others.
What's the NRCC position on primaries? I know you're always with incumbents. I'm curious if there's ever an exception on the incumbent front. Is there any exception? Would Blake Farenthold be an exception on the incumbent front, for instance?
Well, if we were in a position where somebody had a very serious misdeed and there was credible evidence, right now there is an ethics investigation going on Blake Farenthold. You know, I've never been shy about providing leadership, and I would provide leadership in those cases. I publicly asked Roy Moore to step aside. Right. And, you know, I won't be shy to ask our folks where there are allegations that are serious that come forward to step aside.
So Blake Farenthold shouldn't assume he's got guaranteed NRCC support yet until this ethics investigation's done.
Until the facts come out. That's correct.
Let me ask you about open primaries. You have a lot of interest groups that want to mess around in primaries. Is the NRCC going to try to pick candidates in primaries? Are you always going to stay out, or do you have a hard and fast rule?
The NRCC has a policy of staying out of open seat primaries. There are a lot of people around town that get involved in open seat primaries. My job is to hold our incumbents, whether they have a tough primary or a tough general election. And so far, we've been able to do that in the last few.
Yeah.
We've haven't had many incumbents beat in primaries, and we've had not many incumbents beat in general elections. And my goal is to try to make sure we hold our majority and continue to make a difference for the American people, like the tax reform bill that we're going to get done that I think will grow the economy. Yeah. It'll put pressure on wages and increase people's salaries and grow our economy. And I think it's going to be a big victory. And I know that there's a lot of naysayers out there, but I think when people see the impact of this on the economy, I feel pretty confident we're going to be able to run on the economy in 2018, Chuck.
Steve Bannon, asset or liability for Republicans in 2018?
Well, that depends if you're in a primary or a general election.
So it sounds like you think he's more of an asset in a primary and more of a liability in a general election?
He's definitely an asset in some primaries. You know, he can be an asset or a liability depending on your district, Chuck. We got to have candidates that match their districts. He could be an asset in some and a liability in others.
Congressman Steve Stivers, Republican from Ohio, the man in charge of the House Republican campaign arm. Thanks for coming on and sharing your views, sir.
Hey, thanks, Chuck.